It began, as many quiet nights do, with the sound of rain. Not a heavy storm, not a wild downpour, just a soft, steady rain that fell in delicate patterns against the cobblestones of a narrow street. The lamps that lined the lane cast circles of honey-colored light, and in the mist that hovered near the ground, those lights seemed to float like lanterns adrift on a slow-moving river. At the far end of the street, almost hidden between a watchmaker's shop and a bakery that smelled faintly of cinnamon and bread, stood a small, crooked shop with an old, hand-painted sign that read, "The Suitcase Emporium." Its windows were fogged from the inside, the glass rippled with age, and if you looked closely, you might see a soft, golden glow flickering beyond them, as though the shop itself was quietly awake, even when the rest of the world was not. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of leather, old wood, and stories. Shelves climbed the walls, all the way to the ceiling, lined with suitcases of every size and shape. Some were worn and patched with age, others shone faintly, polished to a soft gleam. There were steamer trunks with brass latches, tiny carry-on cases that looked fit for a doll, and great traveling chests bound with iron. Dust drifted in slow spirals through the light of a flickering lamp, and the only sound came from an old grandfather clock in the corner, ticking patiently, as if it too had been keeping time for a very long while. Behind the counter sat an elderly man with silver hair that caught the lamplight like strands of frost. His eyes were kind, half hidden behind round spectacles that always seemed to slide a little down his nose. He wasn't reading or writing, just sitting, waiting, as if expecting something, or someone. He had been there for so many years that it was hard to tell where the man ended and the shop began. He was part of its story, just as much as the suitcases were. Every now and then, the bell above the door would ring softly, a faint, gentle chime, almost musical. Sometimes a traveler would step in, shaking off the rain, looking for something practical. But more often, the visitors who came were not entirely sure why they were there. They would step inside and look around slowly, their eyes tracing the shelves, their fingers brushing against the old leather handles. And as they wandered, the old man would smile and say in a quiet voice, "Every suitcase in this shop holds a journey. Some are yet to begin. Some have never ended." If you listened carefully, you could sometimes hear faint sounds coming from the cases themselves, the distant echo of a train whistle, the soft crash of waves, the call of birds in a faraway forest. Some people thought it was their imagination, but those who lingered long enough began to understand that this shop was not like others. One evening, long after the rain had started, the bell above the door rang again. A young woman stepped inside, dripping from the storm, her scarf trailing droplets onto the old wooden floor. She looked uncertain, as though she hadn't meant to come in at all. The old man looked up, smiled, and nodded once. "You've come to find something," he said simply, as though he had been expecting her. She hesitated, glancing around. "I don't really know what," she replied softly. Her voice sounded tired, but not unhappy, the way a person sounds when they've been searching for something they can't quite name. He nodded again, as though that made perfect sense. "That's usually the way of it," he said. Then he rose slowly, the clock ticking in rhythm with his steps, and began to move along the shelves. His fingers brushed over the cases as he passed, tracing the outlines of journeys long gone. Finally, he stopped in front of a small, weathered suitcase near the corner of the room. It was scuffed and old, its brass corners tarnished, but it had a quiet dignity about it, the kind of beauty that only time could give. "This one," he said softly. The young woman stepped closer. "It looks ordinary," she said. The old man smiled faintly. "All the best things do." He lifted the suitcase gently from the shelf and set it on the counter. The clasps opened with a soft click. Inside, instead of the expected lining or compartments, there was something else, a soft, shimmering light that rippled like water. The young woman leaned closer. She thought she saw the edge of a forest, glowing beneath a moonlit sky. Then a small, gentle wind drifted up from the case, carrying the scent of pine and salt and something else, something like memory. Her eyes widened. "Is it real?" "Real enough," the old man said. "Every suitcase in this shop remembers a journey. Some are waiting for a traveler to finish it. Some are waiting for one to begin." She stood there for a long moment, watching the faint light shift and breathe. There was something about it that felt familiar, though she couldn't say why. Something about the sound of waves in the distance, the way the wind moved through the trees. She reached out a hand, almost without thinking, and her fingertips brushed the light. And then the world changed. The scent of rain became the scent of sea air. The floor beneath her was no longer wooden but soft and shifting, like sand. The faint ticking of the clock faded away, replaced by the distant hush of waves. She looked up, and the sky was vast and silver, the moon low and full, casting light over a shore that stretched endlessly in both directions. For a long time, she stood there, feeling the cool breeze against her skin, listening to the sound of the sea. It didn't feel like a dream, it felt like a memory, or perhaps like a story she'd forgotten she was part of. There was no fear, no rush, no need to understand. Only peace. Somewhere behind her, a voice, faint and kind, whispered, "Take your time. Every traveler returns when they are ready." The waves whispered, the sand sighed, and the moonlight wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She walked slowly along the shore, her footsteps leaving no mark, and for the first time in what felt like years, her heart was quiet. Back in the little shop, the rain still fell softly. The old man sat once more behind the counter, his hands folded, his eyes on the gently glowing suitcase. The light inside shimmered faintly, like moonlight on water. He smiled, as if he could see what she was seeing, as if he had seen it many times before. The clock ticked. The rain fell. The world outside moved on. But in that tiny, magical shop, time waited, patient, kind, and still. One day, the young woman would return, and when she did, she would carry with her a story, quiet, wondrous, full of peace. The suitcase would close softly, ready for the next traveler who wandered in from the rain. And so it went, night after night, year after year, in that little shop at the end of the cobblestone street, where journeys rested, and dreams began. The rain fell softer. The light dimmed. And the old man smiled, as the world drifted gently into sleep. Crescent moon sparkles years passed, though it was hard to say how many. For the young woman, time had become a soft, liquid thing, flowing and folding like the sea she had first stepped into through the glowing suitcase. The world she had found there was vast and quiet and full of light that never hurt the eyes. She had walked through forests where the trees whispered in languages older than words, sat beside lakes that mirrored the stars, and drifted down rivers that carried her not toward any destination, but deeper into stillness itself. There were nights when she thought of the little shop, of the old man with his kind eyes and the rain that had followed her inside. Sometimes, when she sat beneath the pale glow of a silver moon, she could almost hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock. But time never pulled at her there. It didn't push or chase or hurry. It simply was. And then, one morning, though it might just as easily have been an evening, she felt something change. A quiet tug in the air, gentle but sure. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was certain. It was the soft call of return, like the echo of a song she had forgotten the words to. She stood for a moment at the edge of a meadow, her hand brushing through tall grass heavy with dew. The air shimmered faintly before her, and she understood. With one last deep breath, she stepped forward. The scent of sea and pine folded away, replaced by the familiar warmth of wood and lamplight. The sound of waves faded into the slow, steady tick of a clock. The world reshaped itself, and when she opened her eyes again, she was standing once more inside the suitcase emporium. The rain had stopped. The air smelled faintly of dust and cinnamon. The lamps burned softly, casting pools of golden light on the floor. For a moment, she thought nothing had changed, the same shelves, the same cases, the same soft hum of quiet. But when she turned toward the counter, the man who sat there was not quite the same. His hair was still silver, his smile still kind, but there was something deeper in his eyes now, a knowing, as though he had seen 1,000 travelers come and go since the day she left. "Welcome back," he said, his voice the same gentle tone that seemed to hum with the rhythm of the rain. She took a small step forward, feeling the warmth of the floorboards beneath her feet. "How long was I gone?" she asked softly. He tilted his head slightly, thinking. "Here, not long," he said. "Out there," he smiled faintly. "Long enough." The clock ticked behind him, and somewhere in the back of the shop, a case let out a faint sigh, as if something within it had just finished dreaming. She looked down at the suitcase on the counter, the same one that had opened like a doorway on that rainy night. Its light had dimmed now, the surface of it calm and still. She reached out, brushing her fingers across the old leather handle. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It always was," the man replied. "You just needed to see it." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the sound of the clock and the distant drip of rain outside. The shop felt even quieter than she remembered, as though it had been holding its breath, waiting for her to return. Finally, she looked up. "Are all the suitcases like that?" He smiled, that small, knowing smile. "Everyone holds a journey," he said. "Some are meant to be opened once. Some more than once. Some, not at all, until the right person comes along." He glanced toward the shelves, where the light seemed to shimmer faintly between the rows of leather and brass. "They find who they need to find." The woman nodded slowly. She could feel it now, the quiet hum beneath the air, the faint pulse that made the shop feel alive. She understood what it was. Not magic in the way of spells or tricks, but something softer, older. Memory. Intention. Hope. Every suitcase in the room was carrying a fragment of someone's dream, waiting for it to be rediscovered. She smiled, her heart calm and light. "Do you ever take a journey yourself?" she asked. The old man's eyes twinkled. "I have," he said. "Long ago. My journey led me here. Now I keep the doors open for others." He turned the suitcase gently, closing it with a quiet click. The sound echoed softly in the room, the sound of endings that aren't really endings at all. He looked up at her again, eyes warm. "Would you like to keep it?" She hesitated. Then she shook her head, smiling faintly. "No. I think someone else will need it." He nodded, as though he had known she'd say that. "As it should be," he said. The rain outside had slowed to a whisper, the air now filled with the scent of wet earth and the faint sweetness of bread from the bakery next door. The world beyond the fogged glass seemed softer, as if seen through a dream. She stepped toward the door, her footsteps quiet on the old floorboards. The bell above the door chimed as she opened it, that same delicate sound as before, like a note held just long enough to fade into silence. She looked back once. The old man sat at his counter, the light of the lamp painting a soft halo around him. The suitcase still glowed faintly beside him, waiting. "Good night," she said. He smiled. "Good night, traveler." And then she was gone, stepping into the quiet rain, the soft fog wrapping around her like a blanket. The cobblestones gleamed under the lanterns. The world was peaceful, slow, and alive. She walked without hurry, her heart full, her steps light. She didn't know where she was going next, but that no longer mattered. The journey, the real one, had already begun. Back in the little shop, the man looked toward the shelves, his gaze lingering on the softly glowing cases. He whispered something under his breath, not words, exactly, but something like a wish. The clock ticked on, the rain whispered against the window, and the air shimmered faintly with the warmth of stories yet to come. Outside, the lanterns flickered. The fog deepened. The world exhaled. And somewhere, in the soft, endless hush of night, a suitcase dreamed of its next traveler. The light dimmed. The rain softened. And the shop slept once more, patient and timeless, under the gentle hum of rain and memory. Cloud with rain sparkles, the rain had long since faded to a mist, soft and silver, curling through the alleyways like breath. The lamps glowed faintly in the fog, their light trembling across wet stone. The world was quiet, that deep, endless quiet that only comes when the night itself is drowsy. The suitcase emporium stood where it always had, half forgotten by day, half awake by night. Inside, everything waited, as if holding its breath for whoever might wander in next. It was nearly midnight when the bell above the door chimed again. The sound was different this time, lighter, more curious. The door creaked open, and a small boy stepped inside. He was no older than 10, bundled in a coat a size too big, his shoes damp from puddles. He carried no umbrella, only a small paper bag from the bakery down the street, its corners soft with rain. He blinked at the glow of the lamps and the endless shelves that seemed to stretch into forever. The old man behind the counter looked up from his cup of tea and smiled. A bit late for wandering, isn't it? He asked gently. The boy shrugged. Couldn't sleep, he said simply. It's too quiet at home. My mom says the rain helps her sleep, but it just sounds sad to me. The old man chuckled softly. Rain can sound sad, he said, until you learn it's just the sky whispering its stories. He leaned forward slightly. You found the right place for stories, you know. The boy's eyes widened as he looked around. Are these all suitcases? Every one, the old man said, his voice warm and patient. And each of them holds a journey. Some are filled with memories. Some hold dreams. And some, he glanced toward the back of the shop, where the light shimmered faintly, are waiting for someone like you. The boy tilted his head. Like me? Someone who listens, the man said. He rose from his chair and motioned for the boy to follow. They walked slowly down the narrow aisle between the shelves. The air was thick with the scent of leather, dust, and something sweeter, like the faint memory of faraway rain on wildflowers. The boy's shoes squeaked softly on the floorboards. Every few steps, he brushed his fingers over his suitcase, feeling the smoothness of one, the worn edges of another. Some were old and cracked, others polished to a shine. A few gave off the faintest hum, like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Finally, the old man stopped. On a low shelf, tucked between two great travel trunks, sat a small case made of dark green leather. It had tiny brass feet, a handle wrapped in twine, and a small tag tied to the latch that read, simply, For Dreamers. The boy crouched down, staring at it. What's inside? The old man smiled. That's for you to find out. The boy hesitated. Is it magic? The old man's eyes twinkled. All stories are. The boy reached out and unlatched the clasps. The sound was soft, a click like the start of a secret. When he lifted the lid, a faint glow poured out, pale and shifting like moonlight on rippling water. For a moment, the boy thought he saw stars, hundreds of tiny lights suspended in the air inside the case. Then he heard something faint, the whisper of wind through tall grass, the hoot of an owl far away. Without realizing it, he leaned closer. The smell of rain and night air filled his nose. He could almost taste the freshness of it. The old man's voice came from far away now, quiet but clear. Every dream begins with a step, he said. The boy blinked, and then he was standing in the middle of a field. The grass brushed against his legs. Fireflies drifted through the air, their glow soft and golden. The sky was wide and full of stars, so many that they looked like spilled sugar across velvet. A warm breeze carried the scent of apples and wood smoke. In the distance, he could see the lights of a small village, lanterns swaying gently in the night. He took a step forward, then another. His shoes no longer felt wet. The air hummed faintly, the kind of hum that feels alive. Somewhere nearby, a stream murmured softly to itself, winding between stones smooth as glass. He followed the sound until he came to a small wooden bridge. The moon hung low above it, casting silver across the water. On the other side of the bridge stood a row of glowing pumpkins, their carved faces smiling, each holding a tiny lantern inside. A sign beside them read, Welcome, Dreamer. He smiled without meaning to. The sadness that had followed him from home, the hollow quiet of his small room, the ache of missing someone, began to melt away. Here, everything felt gentle. The air was full of lullabies he couldn't quite remember but somehow knew. He sat down on the edge of the bridge and looked into the stream. The water shimmered with stars. If he listened closely, he could almost hear voices, faint and kind, whispering stories beneath the surface. Not words, exactly, but the rhythm of comfort. For a while, he simply sat there, letting the sound of the water and wind fill his chest. The loneliness that had once felt sharp became soft, then quiet, then gone. When he finally stood again, he saw something small resting beside the bridge, a smooth stone, glowing faintly with blue light. He picked it up, and the moment his fingers touched it, he felt warmth spread through his hand. The stone pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. He smiled, tucked it into his pocket, and turned back toward the field. The air shimmered faintly, and before he could take another step, the scene around him began to fade, the stars melting, the grass dissolving into mist. He blinked. The suitcase was closed again. The shop was quiet. The old man sat behind the counter, watching him with that same patient smile. "Did you find what you needed?" he asked. The boy nodded slowly, still holding the faint warmth of the stone in his hand. "I think I did," he whispered. "Good," said the old man. "That's how you know it's yours." The boy looked down. The suitcase now bore a small inscription along its edge, faint but glowing, for listeners. He looked up again, but the man was already turning back toward his shelves, humming softly to himself. The boy stood there for a moment, then stepped out into the night. The bell above the door chimed gently as he left. The street was quiet again. The rain had stopped completely, and the air smelled of wet stone and baked bread. The boy looked down the lane, and for just a second, he thought he saw the faint glow of pumpkins in the mist, warm, steady, waiting. He smiled, pulled his coat tighter, and began to walk home. The stone in his pocket pulsed once, gently, like a promise. Back inside the suitcase emporium, the old man sipped his tea and looked toward the empty space where the green suitcase had been. He smiled to himself. Outside, the lamps flickered in the fog. The rain began again, soft and slow, wrapping the world in its gentle hush. The shop breathed in. The clock ticked on. And somewhere deep within the shelves, another suitcase began to glow. The world turned, and the night whispered its stories once more. Cloud with rain candle sparkles. The night deepened, and then, without anyone quite noticing when it happened, it began to dissolve into the earliest gray of dawn. The rain slowed to a hush, the fog thinning until it looked like the breath of the world itself. The lamps outside flickered softly, their light pale and tired now, fading as the first traces of morning crept into the sky. Inside the suitcase emporium, the air was still, wrapped in that particular kind of silence that comes only after stories have ended and before the world wakes. The shelves stood tall in the dim light, each suitcase resting in quiet contentment, as though they too were sleeping. The faint glow that lingered around some of them had dimmed now, not gone, but settled, like embers beneath the surface, waiting for the next touch, the next traveler, the next whisper of a dream. The old man sat behind his counter, his hands folded loosely before him. His tea had long gone cold, but he didn't seem to mind. He was watching the door, as he often did, his expression calm, the corners of his mouth turned up in the smallest, softest smile. The bell above the door gave a faint tremble now and then, though no one entered. Perhaps it was just the wind, or perhaps the shop was exhaling after another long night of remembering. On the counter, where the green suitcase had been, a small note lay folded neatly. The old man picked it up, unfolding it slowly. Inside, written in careful, uneven handwriting, were 3 words: "Thank you, friend." He read it once, then placed it gently beneath the lamp. The light shone through the paper, making the ink glow faintly. "You're welcome," he said softly, and the words seemed to hang in the air, settling over the room like dust motes in sunlight. Outside, the first birds began to sing. Their calls were low and drowsy, like they, too, were waking from a dream. The rain had left the street gleaming, the puddles catching the new light and scattering it in little fragments of gold. The bakery's sign creaked as it swung in the breeze, and the smell of warm bread drifted faintly down the lane. The old man rose, his steps slow but sure. He moved through the shop, adjusting a strap here, brushing dust from a handle there. His touch was careful, reverent. Every suitcase, every trunk, every chest was part of something greater, a chorus of stories woven into the quiet fabric of the shop. Each one hummed with memory, with possibility, with the echo of footsteps that had come and gone across the years. He stopped at one of the shelves, where a small, battered brown suitcase rested between 2 larger trunks. It was nothing special to look at, just old leather and brass, worn smooth from use. But when he ran a hand across the lid, it felt warm, as if something inside had recently stirred. He smiled, his eyes soft. "Soon," he murmured. "Someone will find you soon." The clock in the corner struck 5. Its chime was gentle, each note spreading through the room like ripples on still water. The old man turned down the wick of the lamp, dimming the glow until only the faintest ember of light remained. The shop slipped into half shadow, filled with that early morning peace that sits between dream and day. He returned to his chair, lowering himself slowly, his body folding into its familiar shape. He leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the faint hum of the world outside, the first carriage wheels on wet cobblestones, the sigh of the wind moving through narrow streets, the soft, steady rhythm of rain returning somewhere far away. He could almost hear the stories still echoing, the woman walking through moonlit forests, the boy sitting by a glowing stream, the whisper of waves from suitcases that had not yet been opened. They layered softly over one another, weaving a tapestry of journeys and dreams. He smiled, and for a moment, it was hard to tell whether he was awake or half dreaming. The line between the two was thin here, thinner than anywhere else. Outside, dawn slowly unfurled across the rooftops, painting the mist in strokes of gold and pale blue. The world began to stir. The first shopkeepers unlocked their doors. A cat darted across the street, pausing to shake raindrops from its fur. The air smelled of bread and clean rain and the faintest trace of possibility. Inside the Suitcase Emporium, time stood still, just for a little while longer. The old man let his eyes close. The clock ticked softly. The shelves stood silent but watchful. The glow from one or two suitcases brightened faintly, not enough to light the room, just enough to whisper that they were still dreaming. And the shop breathed on. It dreamed of footsteps yet to come, of curious eyes and gentle hands. Of people who would wander in from the rain, searching for something they couldn't name, and find it waiting quietly inside a simple, ordinary suitcase. The morning light reached the window, turning the old glass amber. The bell above the door gave one soft chime, as if in greeting to the day. The world outside was waking, but inside, the quiet lingered, patient, kind, endless. The Suitcase Emporium slept with its eyes open, watching the dawn, keeping its stories safe for one more day. And somewhere in the distance, as the first rays of sunlight touched the fog, a new traveler stirred, dreaming of rain, and a door at the end of a cobblestone street that would soon open just for them. The clock ticked once more. The world exhaled. And all was well. Crescent moon sparkles. The rain returned that night, soft and delicate at first, a silver whisper brushing against the window panes of the Suitcase Emporium. The lamps outside flickered again, their light falling across the wet cobblestones in long, trembling reflections. The shop was closed for the evening, its door locked and its curtains drawn, but the glow from inside was still faintly visible, a warm pulse of amber in the gray. The old man sat by the counter, a blanket over his knees, a cup of tea cooling beside him. The shop hummed quietly, not a sound you could hear exactly, but one you could feel. It was the hum of waiting, of stories not yet told, of doors that had not yet been opened. Every so often, one of the suitcases gave the softest creak, as though shifting in its sleep. Outside, a carriage rolled past. Somewhere nearby, a clock struck 9. The street was mostly empty now, except for the rain and the faint glow of lanterns. But then, from the fog, the sound of light footsteps began to echo, uneven at first, then clearer. A figure appeared beneath an umbrella, walking slowly down the lane. It was a boy, perhaps 12 or 13, his coat too big for him, his hair damp with rain. He moved with the hesitant air of someone who had been walking for a long time and wasn't quite sure where he was headed. The umbrella was tilted low, hiding most of his face, but his eyes darted toward the windows that still showed light. He stopped in front of the shop. The golden glow of the lamps inside shimmered against the glass, catching the raindrops that slid down like tiny shooting stars. He hesitated, then raised a hand and pushed the door. The bell chimed, that same delicate, silvery sound, and the old man looked up. The boy stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The warmth of the shop wrapped around him instantly, the scent of cedar and old paper filling his lungs. He blinked in surprise, his eyes scanning the rows upon rows of cases, some small enough to fit in a pocket, others large enough to hold a lifetime. "Good evening," the old man said, his voice carrying that same gentle cadence, the rhythm of rain and quiet roads. The boy nodded shyly, clutching the handle of his umbrella. "I didn't mean to come in," he said softly. "I was just walking. It's cold." "Well," the man said, "then it's a good thing you found your way here. You can sit for a while. The rain will be heavy soon." The boy hesitated, then nodded. He He set his umbrella by the door and crossed to the chair near the counter. His shoes squeaked faintly on the wooden floor. He looked around again, his eyes wide. "This is a suitcase shop?" The man smiled. "That's right." The boy leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Why are there so many? Don't people just need one?" "Some do," said the man. "Others need more than they know." The boy frowned a little, studying the nearest case, a deep navy trunk with brass corners and a faint shimmer when the light hit it. "Do you sell them all?" "Eventually," said the man. "But not to everyone. They don't always choose the person who comes first." The boy tilted his head. "They choose?" The man nodded. "Sometimes." He leaned forward, his eyes kind. "Would you like to see?" The boy looked uncertain, but curiosity had already softened the line of his shoulders. He nodded slowly. The old man rose and walked between the shelves, his hand trailing lightly across the handles. He stopped before a small suitcase on the bottom shelf, an old leather case with scuffs and a single faded sticker of a ship. It was nothing special to look at, and yet the air around it seemed warmer somehow, more awake. "This one," the man said softly. He placed it on the counter and opened the latch. The sound of the metal clicking open was soft but crisp, almost musical. The lid lifted slowly, and from within came a faint golden light. Not bright, not showy, but warm, like sunlight through autumn leaves. The boy leaned forward, eyes wide. "What's in there?" The man smiled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why don't you tell me what you see?" The boy peered inside. At first, he saw only light. Then, shapes began to form, the glint of water, the faint outline of trees, the suggestion of a bridge crossing a narrow stream. He gasped softly. "It's my village," he said, his voice trembling a little. "But it's different. It's quiet. And there's music? I can almost hear it." The man nodded slowly. "Sometimes, what's inside isn't a place you can travel to," he said. "It's a memory, or a wish, or a piece of home that never left you." The boy's eyes stayed fixed on the light, his lips parting slightly as if he were about to speak, but no words came. His breathing slowed, his shoulders eased, and a soft calm settled over him. He didn't notice when his eyelids began to droop, or when the light dimmed to a gentle gold mist. The old man watched quietly, the corners of his mouth lifting in a small smile. The boy's head nodded once, twice, and then rested softly against his arm. His breathing deepened, slow, steady, peaceful. The shop was silent again, save for the soft hum of rain and the low ticking of the clock. The light from the open suitcase pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. After a while, the old man rose. He closed the suitcase gently, the light fading as the lid clicked shut. He set it back on the shelf, then returned to his chair. He didn't wake the boy, there was no need. The boy was already wandering through the softest of dreams, safe and unhurried. Outside, the rain deepened to a steady rhythm, a lullaby of droplets and wind. The old man looked toward the window. The world beyond was wrapped in fog and lamplight. Somewhere in that mist, morning waited, but not yet. Not for a while. Inside the suitcase emporium, time had slowed again. The shelves stood in quiet rows, each suitcase dreaming softly of faraway places, of faces and footsteps yet to come. And as the rain sang on, the shop and all within it drifted gently, quietly, into the heart of sleep. Cloud with rain sparkles, the rain softened again, tapering into a rhythmic patter, the kind that seems to echo from far away, from another time, another dream. The lamps outside swayed in the breeze, their reflections stretching across puddles like molten amber. Inside, the suitcase emporium rested in its familiar, breathing quiet. The boy slept soundly in the chair near the counter. His head had slipped onto his folded arms, and the faintest smile curved his lips. The old man watched him for a long time, his eyes tender and distant, as though he were seeing not just the boy before him, but every traveler who had ever found their way through his door, every lost heart that had come in from the rain, seeking warmth without quite knowing why. He leaned back in his chair, his body swaying ever so slightly with the creak of the old wood beneath him. The light from the lamp flickered, low and steady, like the heartbeat of the room. The faint scent of tea, cedar, and rain filled the air. In that quiet, the world outside began to fade. Not disappear, just soften. The lines between night and morning blurred, between rain and mist, between waking and dream. The old man closed his eyes for a moment and listened. The shop was never truly silent. Beneath the hush, there was always a murmur, like the rustle of pages, or the sigh of distant waves. If you listened closely, you could almost hear the suitcases whispering to one another. Not words exactly, but something gentler, fragments of lullabies from long ago, the sound of wind over faraway hills, the faint call of trains passing through fog. It was the sound of memory, slow and kind and endless. The boy stirred slightly, shifting in his sleep. His breathing stayed even. Perhaps he was dreaming of the place he'd seen glowing inside the case, his village under golden light, the river glimmering beneath the bridge, the hush of evening spreading through fields. Perhaps he was walking there now, his feet bare against the grass, the world safe and whole again. The old man's voice came in, quiet as the rain. "That's it," he murmured. "Rest now. You're safe." He wasn't speaking just to the boy, not really. His voice carried softly into the room, a soothing current that touched every corner, every shelf, every dreaming suitcase. "Everything you were," he whispered, "everything you hoped for, it's still here. The world keeps it for you. You never truly lose it. You only set it down for a while, until you're ready to find it again." The rain answered with a slow rhythm, steady and patient. It tapped gently at the windows, like an old friend who never leaves. "Sleep, traveler," the man continued. "Sleep deeply. The stories will wait. The world will wait. You've done enough for now." His words melted into the air, becoming part of the hush itself. The clock ticked faintly in the distance, slow, unhurried, the kind of ticking that doesn't count seconds so much as breaths. The light from the lamps dimmed a little more, wrapping the room in amber shadow. Outside, the fog began to rise again, curling between the cobblestones, softening every shape and sound. The street fell silent, except for the soft trickle of water down the gutters and the occasional rustle of leaves. Somewhere far off, a train's whistle echoed, low, haunting, beautiful, before fading into nothing. Inside, the old man breathed in deeply, then exhaled, his shoulders easing. He felt the same calm he always did when the night grew deep like this, when the world seemed to breathe along with him. He closed his eyes, and in the quiet of his mind, he could almost hear all the travelers who had ever stepped through his door. Their laughter, their footsteps, their gasps of wonder as the suitcases opened before them. And for a moment, he felt them all still here, not gone, just resting, as if the stories themselves had found a home in the walls and the floor and the air. The boy's breathing deepened. The clock ticked. The rain sighed. The old man whispered again, his voice barely audible now, "Sleep, sleep now. The night will carry you. The dreams will hold you. You are home." The last of the lamplight shimmered against the shelves, and one by one, the faint glows from the suitcases dimmed to soft gold, then to silver, then to nothing at all, until the room was wrapped entirely in peace. Time loosened its hold. The world slowed to a single, gentle rhythm, breath, rain, heart, hush. The boy's dreams deepened, flowing into the still waters of pure rest, where even thoughts are soft, and every sound feels like a cradle song. The rain, steady and kind, became the heartbeat of the world. The old man's chair creaked softly as he settled deeper into it. The shop itself seemed to sigh, content, alive, eternal. And in that tiny, forgotten corner of the city, where the light from the street lamps flickered like candle flames in the mist, the suitcase emporium continued to dream, not of tomorrow, not of yesterday, but of the quiet in between. A quiet so deep, so tender, so infinitely gentle, that anyone who stepped into it, no matter how lost, would finally feel at peace. And as the last drop of rain traced its way down the window, the old man whispered one final time, for anyone still listening, those half-awake, half-dreaming souls scattered across the world, "Good night, traveler. Sleep well. Your story is safe here." The rain faded to mist. The world sighed. And sleep, soft, luminous, and endless, took its gentle hold. Crescent moon sparkles, and so, The rain fell softer still, a hush over rooftops and windowsills, the sound of the world exhaling. The Suitcase Emporium breathed along with it, its shelves like the ribs of some great, dreaming creature. The air shimmered faintly, filled with the warmth of old stories, with the quiet pulse of time that no clock could truly measure. The old man's voice was gone now, folded back into the stillness. His eyes were closed, his chin resting lightly against his chest. The tea had gone completely cold, but the scent of it, faintly floral, faintly earthy, lingered in the air. The boy in the chair shifted once, murmuring something too soft to understand, and then went still again. His breathing was slow, rhythmic, perfectly calm. The world around him had fallen away, replaced by something deeper than dreaming, the hush beneath thought, where rest lives. Outside, the fog thickened once more. It rolled through the streets, wrapping the lanterns in halos of pale gold, softening the sharp edges of the world. The street beyond the shop disappeared entirely, the rain stitching the fog together until there was nothing left but silver air. Somewhere beyond the mist, the sound of the sea carried faintly, or perhaps it was only the wind. The lines blurred easily now. Everything in this part of the world was dissolving into the same, infinite rhythm. If anyone had passed by the shop just then, they would have seen only the faint outline of the window, the warm amber glow pulsing softly behind it. They might have paused for a moment, listening, certain they'd heard something, a faint melody, maybe, or a lullaby hidden in the sound of rain. But when they listened harder, it would vanish, slipping through their grasp like breath. And then they would move on, never realizing that inside that small, unremarkable shop, time had folded completely. Hours passed. Or minutes. Or none at all. The boy's dreams deepened. He was walking now, not through his village, but through a world stitched together from memory and wonder. He walked down a long, winding path lined with suitcases that glowed softly in the dark. Each one opened just a little as he passed, releasing a whisper of air, a shimmer of light, a glimpse of sky or sea or something even stranger. The path led him through fields of tall grass that swayed without wind. The stars above him moved slowly, almost thoughtfully, like lanterns hung on invisible strings. The air was thick with the scent of rain and old wood, the exact scent of the Emporium itself. In the distance, he could see the faint outline of a door, the same kind that had led him into the shop, only taller, made of light and shadow all at once. He walked toward it, his steps soundless, his heart steady. When he reached it, he placed his hand on the handle. It was warm beneath his fingers, familiar, like something that had always belonged to him. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The knowing itself was enough, that on the other side of the door was not a place, but a feeling. A rest that was endless, patient, kind. He stood there for a long while, the light flickering softly around him, until everything began to dissolve, the path, the grass, the stars. The world dimmed, folding inward like a sigh. When he finally opened his eyes, the shop was still there. The lamp still glowed faintly, the clock still ticked, the old man still slept behind the counter. The boy didn't move. He didn't need to. The sound of the rain was enough to keep him anchored, floating between worlds. The rain thickened again, the drops heavier now but slower, as though time itself were tired. The window fogged over completely, erasing the outside world. The air smelled of rain-soaked leather, cedar, and dreams. A single suitcase, the one that had glowed for him, gave a faint click. The brass latch shimmered once, then stilled. The old man's breathing matched the rain. The boy's matched the clock. The shops matched the night. And then, for a moment, everything aligned, the ticking, the rain, the breath, into one perfect, seamless rhythm. The rhythm of peace. It stretched on, long after thought had stopped, long after the edges of waking had blurred. The sound became softer, smaller, until it was only a pulse, a whisper, a heartbeat. The lamp dimmed completely. The clock's hands slowed. The rain became a hush. The world settled into its gentlest silence, the kind that exists only in the breath between one dream and the next. If you were listening now, you would hear nothing but the quietest sound, the trace of rain, the echo of sleep, the hum of 1,000 resting stories. And if you closed your eyes, truly closed them, you might feel it too, the warmth of the shop around you, the scent of old wood and comfort, the sense that you were exactly where you were meant to be. You might hear the old man's voice once more, fading now, no louder than a sigh, rest now. You found your place. There's nowhere else to go. The world exhales. The dream folds close. And the Suitcase Emporium drifts once more into the quiet heart of sleep, timeless, patient, eternal, waiting, as it always does, for the next traveler to find their way home.